to this typical case. And we're going to kind of talk about two different exceptions. The first is going to be, is it the indifference curve does not have a tangent line. Does not have a tangent line. So this is going to be the case when there's kind of what we're going to call kinky preferences. And so we can imagine this case where we have, here's our Cartesian plane, amount of good 1, amount of good 2. Here's our budget line like this. And then let's say we have our preferences, have these kinks in them. So these are our indifference curves here, and they have these kinks in them. So here's this optimal choice. This is the highest indifference curve that we can get to, given our budget constraint with x2 star and x1 star. But notice that there's no tangency here. So here the indifference curve has a kink right at the optimal point. And so there kind of is no tangent line, right? Tangent line is not defined. Tangent line is not defined. And so here, that tangency requirement or that tangency that we just saw in that previous typical case doesn't happen here. And so here's an exception to that tangency between the budget line. Here's a case where the tangency between the budget line and the indifference curve isn't true, right? This budget line is not tangent to this indifference curve because the tangency line doesn't exist for these kinky preferences. All right, so let's look at another case next, and that's going to be when we only kind of consume one of these goods. Then is going to be when we have like what we might call a boundary optimum. Or sometimes we might call that a corner solution. And so we can draw like a typical example of where this might happen. And here's amount of good 1, amount of good 2. Let's say this is our budget constraint. And then we have these indifference curves that are maybe quasi-linear. So these are our indifference curves. So here's I0, I1, I2, and here the optimal choice is x1 star here, which equals m over p1, since we're only consuming x1. X2 star equals 0 here. We're not consuming any of x2 in our optimal solution. So optimal bundle consists only of good 1 here. Because that's the highest indifference curve we can get to. So we have these kind of quasi-linear utility function. This could be the case that we have these corner solutions where you don't have that tangency here either, right? Because we're at this point right here.